Hey, this is Will Tchakirides interviewing Donald Baker for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 10:56 a.m. on July 11th, 2024. This interview is being recorded at WNCU Studios on the campus of North Carolina Central University. We're here in Durham, North Carolina. All right, Mr. Baker, please, if you don't mind, state your full name and what your relationship is to this station, WNCU.
Donald Lewis Baker. I conceived the idea of a radio station at North Carolina Central University and worked until it happened.
Excellent. And, that means we're going to have a lot to talk about when it comes to WNCU. But let's take it back a little bit. I want to first know where you were born, when you were born, and a little bit about the people who raised you.
I was born in New York City in 1949. I'm a child of the Great Migration. So my mother, my family people are from Carthage, North Carolina. My mother attended attended Fayetteville State. As all of the siblings attended schools in North Carolina, Johnson C. Smith, A&T, North Carolina College, which became North Carolina Central University, Fayetteville State, and everyone migrated to New York, or the New York area, or Detroit.
How many siblings did you have, and who are they?
I have two siblings, an older sister and a younger sister. The older sister is Cecilia Myers, and my younger sister is Pamela Baker.
And I look forward to talking about that migration experience a bit more and the return to Carolina. But tell me about New York. Where did you grow up in New York? And, if I was to be dropped in New York City at the time of your childhood, what would I see? What would it feel like?
You would be dropped in Little Italy, which became Spanish Harlem. I was born and grew up in the projects, Johnson Projects on 112th Street, Lexington Avenue. And I attended a Catholic elementary school when Pope, the most recent Pope, visited the U.S., and he was in New York. He basically only made two stops. One of them was a Catholic school, Our Lady Queen of Angels, in Spanish Harlem, and that's where I attended elementary school.
Was religion big in your family's life?
It was big in my mother's life.
What denomination?
Catholic. Yeah.
And tell me more about Spanish Harlem at this time. What are the demographics of the community?
The demographics of the community was African American and Hispanic. As the projects would have generated, and the projects were near the La Maqueta, the marketplace, which was under the L that ran from Connecticut into New York.
Was that a vibrant marketplace?
Yeah. It was very much so. Fruits, vegetables, clothes, all sorts of commodities. It after my tenure, the market closed some years later, and I think has attempted to reopen in recent years. But I attended Benjamin Franklin High School.
And where was that located?
And that was located there, at the time, there was not a high school in Harlem. So the closest high school was East Harlem. And Benjamin Franklin still sits on Pleasant Avenue, and the back of it faces the East River. It is now a specialty. It's now a school for advanced learning.
Like a magnet school for advanced learning?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Gotcha. And what would you and your friends do for fun during your youth, and was music a part of your life at a young age?
Interesting. Well, in my young life, we played Lodies in the middle of the street, and Lodies is a game where you use the tops of bottles to advance around a controlled perimeter, which is in chalk, and you knock your opponents out, and
you're trying to get close.
Yeah, you make it the surface of the bottle cap, which was metal, very slick. Put some weighted material in it, so you can knock.
It's a kind of a classic variation on it. I feel like that game is in different forms.
Bocce
ball or other types
just like all ball games are in varying forms. But so that in my younger life that brings a memory. And
how about music? Were you listening to music or the radio even?
Well, yes, I was always. My parents listened to jazz and black music, and I remember being in bed and hearing that music. But I went on to begin to listen to jazz principally. Well, I can't say principally, but I listened to all music, all black music at any rate, principally.
And was there
Motown?
Yeah.
From Motown to Coltrane, and WLIB in New York was the first jazz station that I listened to. I remember laying in bed and listening to the radio and thinking about how I would say what was being delivered.
And who were some of the DJs and the voices of WLIB and other stations?
That is Ed Williams. Ed Williams comes to mind principally, and he would be the only one that I remember.
Do you remember anyone named Symphony Sid or Frank Crocker?
Oh, yeah. Symphony, that's interesting. I listened to Symphony Sid a lot. There was a whole culture in New York that he was able to meld, because he moved with the time. So as Latin music integrated with jazz, he played both, which was important because in Harlem and in Latin Harlem, we danced a lot. Danced to Latin music.
Where would you dance?
At the Palladium, at the Palm Garden downtown, and it was an interesting combination of music, the drug life, drugs. You know.
Say more about that.
Well, if you American Gangster is a docudrama. It's a movie, but it's really a docudrama because much of what happened there in that movie really happened in Harlem.
It felt true to life.
It was true to life. The Black Godfather.
Yeah.
The building that they shot his residence in. My aunt lives in that building. I visited that building quite a bit, and it was, and that period was true to form. Wow. As well. But the drug scene was prominent. It was a very big thing in a lot of young people's lives.
You didn't get caught up in it, though.
Well, I did, but unlike what was unique about my situation is that I come from a family of teachers.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what do your parents do for work, and how did that shape you?
Well,
and your family as well.
The most significant part of my shaping came with one question. What college are you going to? And that was at a very young age. And so at the end of my 11th year, when my report card was completely read, I went home and I said, okay, I'm ready to go to North Carolina, because that all of the majority of the young people went back to North Carolina to be educated. My sister went to Johnson C. Smith. She also attended Barber Scotia in Charlotte.
What year did you finish high school?
I finished high school in 1968. 1968. Union Pines High School in Carthage, North Carolina.
So you actually finished up in North Carolina.
Yeah. I went home and I said, I'm going to North Carolina. She had been trying to get me to agree to go.
And part of that was getting away from the distraction of what's in the community.
I saw that I wasn't going to college.
Survival, educational survival. And your folks were teachers, or tell me a bit more again about their occupational life.
My mother, she did not finish Fayetteville State, so she initially she worked in daycare, and she worked at a Catholic daycare initially, and then she began work in the public city daycare nursery system. She went on to finish her degree, and she got her master's as well, continuing to work within that system, but also she owned a beauty parlor. She did hair, and she cleaned offices at night.
It's really juggling a lot of different jobs.
Yeah. So my sister and I, we pretty much took over the cleaning, the nighttime cleaning, on most of which was on Park Avenue downtown in doctors' offices, and
Was that your first job?
Yeah, that was my first job.
And your father?
My father was he was a postal worker, and then he became a city bus driver, and that was well, he actually started in a millinery, so he milled hats.
Right.
You know, back in the day, that's probably back in like the 50s.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he got a job at the post office, and he was there for a number of years. And his final career job was driving a bus, a city bus.
I imagine, was he a union man for those positions?
Mm-hmm.
And was your mother as well a part of the teachers union in New York?
Yeah.
Eventually?
Mm-hmm. But you know, the rest of the majority of members of my family were teachers.
Okay. Some of them, a lot of them in North Carolina.
North Carolina, Detroit, New York.
In New York, when it comes to the black migrations, New York really was kind of a central place for North Carolina migrants to move up to. Is that correct?
The best documented story is it can be found in Warmth of Other Suns. Yeah. Because it documents through newspapers and other documented items the migration from Florida and the Carolinas to New York, from Alabama to Chicago, from New Orleans to the Midwestern states and to California.
Exactly.
And you know, it's just an incredible book because it documents news stories. You know, we have to stop lynching niggers because they're leaving in the middle of the night and we don't have anybody to work. You know, the
push of racial violence, but also understanding the economic picture.
Yeah, right. It's all about, well, you know, the racial violence was suppression. You know, in order to support the economic base.
So tell me, thinking about Isabel Wilkerson's book, and then when you got down to Carolina, graduating eventually in 1968, what was different about that place? What had changed in the context of the 1960s and, you know, civil rights movement and Black Power movement? What did you see when you came back down to Carolina?
Let me divert for a second. I substituted in a history class at the early college here at North Carolina Central a couple of months ago. Their final assignment was an oral history assignment to interview someone who, at 15 years old, witnessed or was involved with a national event. Well, that really spun me because when I got to on a Sunday night, I was watching television, and Malcolm X was assassinated. The news came on of his assassination. When I got to North Carolina, well, even before that, John F. Kennedy, you know, I was witness to that whole event.
How did you feel? Was it frightening?
No, it was memorable. You know, it was memorable. 9/11 was frightening. It was a point of reference, but I wound up talking to this class about I went to the board and I put up my age. I was born in 1949, and from that, at 15, in 1964, I witnessed the assassination of 63 was I think King.
Kennedy.
Was Kennedy. 64 was the assassination of Martin Luther King, and then after that was the assassination of Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, so King in 68, Bobby Kennedy in 68 as well, right?
Yeah. I'm getting the dates mixed up, but
Malcolm X though in 65.
Right, Malcolm. All of those events were part of my history, and it helped to shape my political philosophy.
Can you tell me what your political philosophy was then, and maybe a little bit about how it's evolved?
By description, this is before I left New York. I was impressed with Ron Karenga and his philosophies, and I took on the aesthetic of shaved head, beard, dashiki,
kind of black cultural nationalism.
Yes, that whole thing. When you grow up in New York and you grow up uptown, you only go downtown for very special things. So it's kind of insulated. So the views and beliefs are insulated as well. There was what was called the 5 percenters. You familiar with?
I am.
Yeah. That helped to shape my viewpoint as well. I didn't so much embrace the rhetoric as it was part of what I heard and saw growing up.
Part of the landscape.
Part of the landscape. It was part of the landscape to see guys on 112th Street go down to 110th Street, rob the subway booth, come back and sit on the bench and get picked up. It's just when for whatever reason there's no promise of a future, you see all kinds of reactions to that.
Yeah, it's a complicated picture, right? Because you're talking about expressions of black pride, survival, economic despair.
Yeah.
All of that coming together at this time.
I grew up in part in Johnson Projects, and so did Luther Vandross.
Okay.
But.
Were you a fan of Vandross?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful, soulful R&B.
Because Nat Adderley Jr. was his music director. Okay. So you have the music, the popular music has its base in solid music principles, right. And so there's a lot of jazz that. The black classical music is jazz.
How this is a good time for me to ask you, how is jazz political? How is jazz black political music?
Well, all black music is an outgrowth of a culture, and that culture is an oppressed culture. And gospel music, gospel, you can track it all the way back to the Chain Gang and the rhythms the voice and the sound of the nails being hit on the railroad. You start there and move forward, and you come to gospel music, and then you come to R&B. The devil's music is what that was. Aretha went through that with her father. But money talks, and so you figure it out.
Okay, let me transition a little bit. You're a young man finishing up high school in North Carolina, about to attend college. Did you always have your sights set on Central?
No, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that if I stayed in New York, I was not going to do what I felt I was supposed to achieve. So I was I was hanging out with my buddy Milton, and we went to a high school football game at night. I had never seen one before. It was like a professional game to me. In New York, you had in the only school near Harlem, you had track and field, you had basketball, you didn't have football. The resources weren't there for that, and so that was not an experience that I had until I came south, and in my sharkskin wearing my sharkskin pants and octagon glasses. I was like a spaceman from, but it was a slick look in New York at 17.
So did you feel out of place in North Carolina? Your style?
No, I developed confidence in my style years ago because I had my hair line receded early, at 14 or 15, and I had to work through a way of addressing that. So I shaved my head.
So what?
I remember I was high one night, and I came upstairs I had my girlfriend who came upstairs. She was at the end of the hallway. The bathroom and the bedroom were across the hallway from each other. And in the bedroom, I had a closet full of hats because I was self-conscious about my hairline receding at such a young age. And I took each hat and I walked to I stepped in the hallway and looked at my girlfriend, and then I went to the bathroom and I looked in the mirror, and I saw all of these different people, all these different images, and that was not. It was uncomfortable. So
okay.
So the solution was to shave my head.
This was at Central?
No, this is
Before.
high school. I was still in New York in high school.
I see, okay.
But what helped with that was that the Ohio players had women with shaved heads on the album covers. It was also stylish in New York during a period to have a shaved head. That left, and then it came back in a big way, and guys use it now to look younger.
Sounds like your hairline was receding at the right time.
Yeah, but and it's black and white, and everybody else is now shaving their head.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, Well, tell me about the decision to matriculate at Central and what the campus was like when you eventually came here.
That culture, the New York culture, was very much a part of the North Carolina College campus scene, because there was so many young people who were coming south, and so there was a whole drug scene here as well, not only on campus but in the community.
Was there like a distinct? You're talking about the community as well, but was there a distinct HBCU counterculture?
I didn't see it as a counterculture.
Okay.
Well, I didn't recognize it by name, yes, but when you are involved in that sort of community and environment, that those kind of communities support each other. So if you're doing something, you continue to do it in part because socially it's acceptable.
Right. Is this sort of would you describe the political culture as left, or how would you understand it politically?
The political culture. Well, there may be variations in how people in the black community see the political issues, but they are principally from their individual direction and experiences winding up at the same place, because oppression is oppression. People in mass have in the past have experienced going into a store to shop and being suspect, and you're suspect. Or walking behind a white woman just because she's in front of you, but you can feel the tension of uncertainty, and so that experience is universal.
Yeah.
within the American culture.
Regardless how you identify politically, you're going to have to navigate racism, white supremacy, oppression.
Yeah, driving while black,
Right.
is, sounds strange, but it's real.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell me a little bit about the campus culture. Like, what was homecoming like?
Homecoming was as festive as it is today. One of the things with when you are from within an oppressed community, you do things that bring you relief. Small thing like you'll see someone walking slowly across the street, and you're in the car and you have to wait for them. Young person, right? But it's all about their control. I mean, that's a small dynamic, but sometimes that's what that's about. I will get across the street, but I'm gonna make you wait. So that also was reflective in dress, in clothing. One of the things that in an oppressed community that you experience is a relief, is being able to look good.
Is it a form of resiliency?
Yes, and so in New York in my day, it was going buying clothes at Nat Nevins, which was in Harlem. Back then, you might pay $125 for a alpaca sweater or alpaca shirt in wonderful designs, very unique designs. Silk sharkskin pants, alligator shoes. These are the things that you saw at the Palladium and at the Palm Gardens when you're dancing to Latin music and listening to Symphony Sid.
And was that culture present also at
It is a universal. Carolina? It's a universal culture in all black communities. There are books on hats that black women wear to church. It's a whole culture.
Did you feel like you were home?
And so to answer your, I'm coming back to homecoming, because that's what homecoming was reflective of. Dressing, how big can you grow your afro and have it stand out?
Yeah.
In basketball, it was Clyde
Frazier.
Clyde Frazier, wearing fur coats. In American Gangster, what got him into trouble was his girlfriend's insistence that he look like everybody else, and he wore a fur coat and hat, and then they wanted, folk wanted to know, well, who is he?
Mm.
And his story, turned from there, but
yeah,
style.
Right on. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I want to pivot a bit to your interest in radio again, right? So tell me your first radio job, and I know you got into it young.
I was in my room listening to Ed Williams, and Ed Williams played Chick Corea's first album, Tone for Jones Bones. And so that recording must have been published in '66 or '67 as a point of reference for radio, for listening, for my interest, and so I moved to North Carolina, but I continued to listen to music, and at North Carolina Central College, which became North Carolina Central University, I had opportunity to work with Wave Africa, which was a combination of my political interest, my cultural interest, my interest in jazz. It was started by Central students.
Can you briefly describe what was Wave Africa as an institution, as an organization?
Wave Africa was a community radio workshop.
Okay.
That is the license. It was licensed to the community radio workshop.
Now, there was a bit of a struggle around the licensing, if I understand that correctly, right? As far as I know, right, there was a Duke University contingent of students who were looking to apply for an FCC license. And I think some members of Wave Africa's contingent want to make sure that if there's an FM license being applied for, that it would service black audience and black radio listeners, perhaps be black run, right? Because the predominantly white station in the community was white owned, but playing black music, there was folks who wanted a sense of ownership over that process, right? Can you talk about that process going into the founding of the radio station?
Yes, that is right. I was not a part of that. Bob Chapman, and
Steve Roberts, does that sound familiar?
Well, yeah, Steve Roberts was a central student. He was he started that discussion or issue on his own, but then Robert Spruill and Williams, they actually picked up the interest and the effort and applied for a license. And I'm not sure what the relationship is because Steve Roberts was not involved with that.
Okay.
That part of it.
And what was your involvement in the station?
My involvement in the station was bringing it on the air.
Okay.
And I became production manager and an announcer, and I was basically a staff person. Yeah.
And this is WAFR we're talking about.
Wave Africa.
Wave
yeah.
Africa.
Yeah, on Pettigrew Street.
Just describe what the scene is like inside that studio, at the building. What does it feel like?
For young people in the 70s, it was about survival. The protests were about survival. So the political viewpoint was about survival. Today's news is that things ain't getting no better. Go to music. That sort of biting. I'm looking for the right word.
Was there optimism mixed in with any despair?
Well, yeah. I mean, there was optimism. You're optimistic when you keep moving forward and you create new things as a result of what you believe in.
What was the vision? What did y'all believe in?
That's what WAFR was about. Just as in later years, WNCU, the reason for this station being created here was that North Carolina Central University did not have a voice. It did not have a public voice. Whatever was presented as a voice was a view from the outside.
Right.
Yeah,
we should say WAFR is the first public black-run community radio station.
It was the first station licensed to an African American community, public radio. Now, on the education side, Betty Check helped to start Shaw University Station.
Right. Founded about 68 or so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I kind of want to stay on this point for a minute here. You're talking about serving a black listenership, serving a black community, right? Keep talking about why it's so important that a public black-run radio station exists in this space.
For the same reason that I just mentioned about about North Carolina Central University and WNCU having a voice. Public broadcasting. When during the Harlem riots, there was no coverage of the Harlem riots because there had never been a black journalist trained, and white people couldn't go uptown to report on it.
It's about 1964 or so.
Yeah. I get the dates mixed up, but yeah, no, it was 68. It was 68 because
after King, okay.
Because my mother shipped me to Mackinac Island.
Okay. Where's that?
Right.
Where's that?
Right. Mackinac Island is 300 miles above Detroit.
Okay.
Mackinac Island. I didn't go to Mackinac Island. I went to the family had a hotel, a motel on Carp Lake, but it was in the Mackinac Island area, right? Because Mackinac Island is one of the richest islands in America. I mean, only rich people went there 50 years ago. But she got me as far away as she could from what was going on with the riots and the tension and stuff. And so it was 1968.
You were back home in the summer?
I went from there. I flew to North Carolina to go to school.
Okay.
I mentioned that situation because culturally, what was happening downtown on Pettigrew Street with Wave Africa, and subsequently with creating a station here, it all had to do with public voice, and having your story told the way that you see the story told, and not some perception. So and the Kerner report was all about that. It was all about how white people see, the public sees, the Mexican male as a beanbag carrying guy, coffee beans, and that's it. The perception of Amos and Andy. Had no control. So WAFR was created for the same reason, to create a public voice, to be heard,
to have a sense of control in the black community,
and a sense of control.
And you're talking about empowerment. Right?
Yes.
Did you all at the time see yourselves as maybe in the arts and media space as part of the Black Power movement?
Well, we would get anonymous donations from North Carolina Mutual, who did not want to be publicly supporting. The first day of broadcast, we came on the air with the Last Poets. The revolution will not be televised.
Gil Scott Heron.
And it was like, the statement was, hey, we're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
No, but say a little bit more about the life insurance company and that anonymous donation. What's that dynamic like? How does that happen?
That dynamic happened because of the same reason, suppression within the insurance industry. I mean, we're all in the same community.
But they're contributing. Is this a black insurance company, black owned, or?
Yeah, it was at the time the largest black insurance company in the country, and there's a unique story there because it was they built the tallest building in Durham, but they built it. They had a white guy to come in and front as the owner to get the building built.
Yeah.
So you having to do that, wouldn't you support this radio station? I mean, the first public radio station licensed to an African American community that is free of bullshit.
Yeah. It was all new. It was all something different that really hadn't been done before. Did it feel exciting to be a part of it?
Yes. Yeah. Because I had listened to radio, and I listened to Ed Williams in New York in the jazz station, and I would think, well, okay, I would say it this way. I would deliver it this way. So here I am several years later with an opportunity to be on the air and to experiment with my ideas and music and information.
And who were Wave Africa's listeners? Describe the relationship between yourself as an on-air personality and the people listening. Is there a back and forth?
It was a 3,000 watt station.
It's local.
Well, the signal went had a reach down to Sanford, which is about 50 miles from here. So it was somewhat regional. People generally were not that familiar with the music, but they really appreciated the fact that this station existed. So there were people would come by. I looked up. I was in a production studio on Saturday morning. I looked and Cannibal Adderley walks in because they heard about. Because they heard about this station.
Yeah.
Doing what was totally unacceptable in the past, right? Stevie Wonder was in Greensboro. Stevie Wonder had committed to do a fundraiser for the station, and he did a show in Greensboro and was on his way to Durham, and had the car accident and had a brain hemorrhage as a result of it.
Wow. And
so that that never happened. But then you got Ebony Magazine doing a feature series or article on the radio station.
So you were a known commodity, right? You were getting press.
Mm-hmm.
Black entertainers were coming through.
Right. Frankie Crocker came through. Frankie Crocker was Radio New York.
Yeah.
WBLS, and so the word had gotten out.
Did Wave Africa inspire others to do similar community radio, black community radio?
I think it did.
And how long was it in operation?
it was in operation for about 3 years.
Okay.
And this is the interesting part here. This is the tie-in to North Carolina Central because when Wave Africa went dark, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting reclaimed its equipment, and it gave it to the university, which prompted the university to look into getting a license.
Because it had this equipment.
Because it had this equipment.
And it could be of use.
But if you don't use the equipment in a matter of a few years, the technology is constantly advancing, and so it becomes less important, more expensive. At any rate, it didn't. It was not until I continue to have the interest because of my experience with working with radio. WAFR went silent, but when it went silent, WVSP came on the air. That is Black Public Radio, is licensed to a Sound and Print United.
Exactly.
Out of Warrenton, North Carolina. It was a 100,000 watt station.
I want to talk about WVSP. Just a couple more questions. First, what was your major when you were at Central?
Business.
And do you recall what year you graduated?
I graduated in 1973.
And one thing I want to understand a little bit better, I was talking to Jim Davis yesterday, right?
Okay.
Who helped with the engineering and getting the station run technically.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned, we were talking about the decommissioning and when it went dark, when Wave Africa went dark.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned it was partly because of the process of urban renewal in Durham, that they were actually clearing out building space. He was saying part of it was that they needed to remove the building and the space that the station was actually in. Was that any part of it?
It was finance. It was financial.
Okay, tell me more about the financial aspect.
With most Black enterprises, resources is a challenge. When you're operating a nonprofit radio station, you're not selling ads. Contributions and support is a challenge. If you are politically challenging in your messages, and your perception is to the left, the public perception is to the left, it is even more difficult to get the financial support. And so it was a challenge.
Those life insurance checks might not be flowing in at the same rate.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's political messaging. I understand what you're saying, and yeah, that.
Yeah, so I was not aware of the. I knew that the community was changing, but the station went dark principally because of financial support.
Okay. Tell me about your next position, and tell me a bit about WVSP, right? Voice of the People, and that institution you were mentioning, Sound and Print. Tell me about that station and what your career was like there.
Well, I didn't have a career there. It was a support
Okay.
Because I had developed interest in production, and let's see, I co-produced an audio series of original sound children's books. They were children's books brought to life through audio and using original sound, live characters, all of that. And we won the CPB award for children's programming. The project and company is called Soundscape. So, while I'm working with WAFR, I'm also continuing to develop my personal interests, right? And so that also filtered over or overlapped onto WVSP when Wave Africa went silent and VSP became. I did production work. I did some on-air work too. It started with on-air work, but 50-mile drive there and a 50-mile drive back. Is a lot. I remember I produced a series on new technologies. They wrote a grant. I did the production work and the research and all of that. So that was my connection with WVSP. And personal connection with Val and Jim Lee, because Jim is from Durham, so there was the AFR connection too, and just the whole community of black thought, of political thought. Small community, people know each other.
So were you an employee at the station?
No.
How did you make a living as you're continuing to pursue your interest in radio?
I was working with the Department of Commerce, the Minority Business Development Agency, as an education and training specialist. So my job was to move around the state. And create workshops, bring people together.
Was that fulfilling work?
It was. There were. I remember not being happy there, and I decided that I would incorporate my interests, and so in order to want to get up and go to work in the morning, right? So I created a television series on how to start and operate a small business. And that series, in the end, was it was produced for the Department of Commerce and the Minority Business Development Agency, which was a federal funded agency. But anyway, it was distributed to the 100 community colleges, right? And it was also coupled with case studies. So it's we had a half hour of how to start a business, and in categories. So it was, I guess, about eight episodes, and then each episode had a case study a half-hour case study from the University of Nebraska, and on problems that people had and stuff, and so that combination was distributed to the 100 community colleges in the state, and it also ran on the Blue Ridge Network.
Is that like a local PBS? Or?
No. I was not familiar with it. I heard that they picked it up.
So you're really melding together your family's history of education, right, with media. It makes sense.
Yeah, family educators.
Did this line of work carry you through until you eventually became a director of a station here at WNCU, or did you pursue some other avenues as well in the 80s?
Well, I was teaching. While I was working with the Department of Commerce, I was teaching at night. I was teaching at NC State. I get all of the times mixed up, but I was at NC State.
But let me ask you, what did you like about teaching?
Sharing information and working through to learn while you teach. The best example of that was having to teach about the electromagnetic spectrum, which I didn't fully understand myself and I struggled with. But I taught it, and in teaching it, I learned to understand the spectrum and the dynamic and the impact of it. When television went from dish and antennas, it was because of the change in the electromagnetic spectrum. The fact that we see each other by way of the electromagnetic spectrum, and we see all of the colors, and we hear, everything is so. Over time, I was able to fully understand the breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum and share that with the various classes that I taught.
Interesting. I want to move us towards WNCU, and I want to tie it together with this question here. What did you bring from your experience at Wave Africa, but also your experience teaching, right, and working for the Commerce Department, or on a grant-funded projects like that? You're bringing education, and you're bringing an understanding of Black pride, Black power, self-determination. How did all of that come together to shape who you were as the first director of WNCU?
I would say I would coin it by saying public interest. All of what you reference is around an interest in public interest. It's the Public Radio Act. Congress passed it in 1966, and the goal in passing it was to address the influence of commercial broadcasting and on the country, and to create a public voice in every community in America. And so, it was early enough effort and idea for people like me to capture it. You rarely ever hear about that, how public radio was created, or the intent.
It's really important. I think people
Yes.
today don't really understand that public mission.
Yeah, and so I was, because of my political interests and my interest in sharing information, it all amass and comes together to for me to return to my alma mater, and that is an interesting story, because I was working for the Minority Business Development Agency, creating business workshops around the state. Tchakirides of Richmond took over as the dean of the School of Business at North Carolina Central. We developed a friendship through an interest in business, but also an interest in music. He was a jazz lover, and he listened to a lot of radio, right? He was listening to WVSP the night it went off the air. It became silent, but the importance of that relationship is that Tchakirides of Richmond became chancellor of North Carolina Central University, and with it, he had the kind of interest and perception to support the licensing. Now, back then, and we're talking almost 50 years ago. Back then, if you applied for a license at the FCC, I could do research, pull your license application, and make one change on it and submit it as my own. And a lot of that was happening so that to tie up applications and negotiate out a settlement, a financial settlement. So, okay, so
kind of holding it ransom almost, and
yeah, I was teaching it at NC State, and I got hired at North Carolina Central on July 1. I forget the year, but what's important is I came in July 1. The license the application had been on hold, sitting around. I contacted Jesse Helms' office because he was our congressional representative, and they put me in touch with Shirley Marshall. And Shirley Marshall was then chair of the FCC. She looked into it. The coast was clear. And we were expecting to have the license in by the end of July, so we can move forward. On the last day of the comments, and a counter application was filed by a religious group in Ocala, Florida. Short of it is that this went on for almost a year with lawyers and all of that. Tchakirides of Richmond went out and found the money, borrowed money to pay them off. And that's how we got WNCU.
Wow, so you're describing kind of an extortive practice where these other entities would just basically copy, change one thing in the license, and then hold it until there's a settlement, and they can sort of profit off that in some way. But you got there.
And I have to give him his props.
Toronto, Richmond.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be here today if that had not happened.
If that had not happened.
And what did it feel like when you're going through that process? I'm sure it was frustrating.
Now, he did that through the foundation. And so that balance, that somebody's got to pay for it.
Right,
so,
pay to play a little bit.
Yeah. So it was on the radio station's account to pay that balance
through the endowment for the university.
Yeah,
and I think you're talking like early '90s, late '80s, early '90s. When those initial conversations, then the application.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of delay because
95.
So you finally get on the air in 95, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Tell me about those early days of programming, what the format's like, and what the sort of day-to-day at the station is like in those early moments.
There was a lot of interest amongst people who were interested in radio, and willing to volunteer. And some of those volunteers, after all of these years, are still at the station.
Who are some of those volunteers you can recall?
Howard Bichette. Howard Bichette is monstrous. I mean, he has written a book on the soldiers, the black soldiers.
Buffalo soldiers.
Buffalo soldiers. Yeah. He's a historian, but he's also a musicologist. People don't label him that way. He came to us because we were principally jazz. He came to us with his depth in the music, right? But his other interest was in R&B and classic soul, and he's done weekly shows for that, almost for the length of time he's been here, 30 years, 20 years, something like that. I mean, he is, I remember going to a session at the library down Fayetteville Street. He had on Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was an hour and a half profile on Earth, Wind, and Fire. It was just in depth and very well done with music, sampling and all of that. So Howard Bichette comes to mind. There's several others,
And I want to know what it meant for you to be a director of a station now in this position.
It meant that my interest in announcing and production shifted to some degree to management.
How did you take to management?
I took to it well, I thought. The chancellor and I did not see eye to eye. So in the end, I gave what I could to the station to create it, to make it work. And then I went elsewhere.
What were some of the issues that came up about the direction of the station?
There were personality issues which then raised questions about confidence, and an interesting point that I don't share often. Okay, I'm sitting in Julius Chambers' office. he's got me and he's questioning whatever. So he calls his friend, person he's done business with over the years, another attorney, a civil rights attorney. I can't mention his name because I don't remember his name, but there was during that time, there was a situation with Hillary Clinton. It was a public discourse with her and a fellow student at Princeton. I don't, that I bring that situation up because this was the fellow I'm talking about was this woman's husband. The circle is small up in that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he gets him on the telephone. Now, my association with this person happened a few years prior when a small group of us challenged and held the license of WUNC. The WUNC radio. When we were able to to stop the renewal of the WUNC's license, the outcome of that was that UNC supported the television series that I was producing with the Department of Commerce. So that spun off into distribution around the state. I didn't bring that up. I'm sitting with the chancellor. I'm taking heat. And I'm thinking, F you, But so that Julius Chambers meddled in things that he did not know about. He didn't. His civil rights, not media.
Mm-hmm. Got you.
That's a long,
yeah.
roundabout story, but an important one. Yeah.
Tell me a bit more about the relationship to the listener and some of the events you held to show appreciation to listener appreciation events, and what was the relationship to the community that you were playing music for?
I worked. I, representing the radio station, worked closely with Ira Wiggins and the jazz studies program, which has its own great history. So it was a natural. It was a natural tie. Jazz studies, jazz radio, and so we did some regional things. The jazz study. I'll just say that's a natural tie. There was a lot of involvement with that in support of the jazz studies program and its events, which were public, and we had a common interest in reaching the public and in educating them about the music, on both ends. There's so many events and things that have happened. It's hard to cherry pick it.
No worries. Anything stand out in particular? Just those events with the jazz program.
At this point, no, and maybe I'll come back to it.
Something else I'm curious about, in founding this station, to what extent was, say, WSHA and Shaw an influence? Was it an influence in any way? Is there a connection to that lineage?
Well, I taught at Shaw University.
Tell me you did. Tell me a little bit about teaching at Shaw.
Oh, man. I'm trying to remember. Okay, I left the Department of Commerce for a teaching job at Shaw University. But Shetta Merritt, who I mentioned earlier, that was Chair Howard, she was chairing the department at Shaw. And she pulled me into this interview. The interview went well. We walked out of the interview. She turned to me and said, "I'm going to Howard University." Talk about a setup.
She was at Shaw and moving on to Howard right when she got
Yeah. So I get hired. She turns around and says, "I'm leaving." I was while I was at Shaw for several years before I took the job at NC State.
Did you connect with folks at WSHA when you were teaching there?
When you say I was teaching in the department where the radio station was.
Okay, so you were involved.
And I was teaching media. Yeah, and I was involved.
Who were some of your colleagues that stand out from that time?
Donnell Lewis, because Donnell left and went to Central, and then he wound up hiring me at Central to run the radio station.
Look at that. That's the direct connection right there.
Yeah. And then I had when I left WNCU, I took a year off after leaving per my challenges with Julius Chambers. I took a year off, and on 9/11. I went to work as a consultant for Winston-Salem State University for their radio station.
Okay.
And they were in trouble because a former student of mine had a radio station in Winston, and he was managing two stations, his own station, and he was managing the Winston-Salem station. And there was a commingling of funds that happened. And so, they brought me in, which was nice. I took my hard drive and went to Winston-Salem.
From Central and went to Winston-Salem. I want to get back to Winston-Salem, but I still have a couple more questions from your time at WNCU. I'm interested in non-jazz, non-music programming. What was the sort of public affairs or talk presence of the station at during your time?
Ed Fulbright, he still has a program on WNCU.
And what kind of issues does he cover?
He's a CPA. He came to us asking to volunteer to develop a business, to share information about business.
Financial literacy.
Thank you. That's another one. I mentioned Howard Bichette, but also Ed Fulbright has done an amazing job. Many people that we see on television, bits and pieces of financial interview of a financial consultant like that. They have been on his show, we had a law program.
Is that the Legal Eagle?
Legal Eagle,
Review?
Yeah. The news program, that I never quite got to where I wanted it, and I don't think it has matured to where Lakeisha Snipes Freeman,
current station manager,
the current station manager, I think she has some interest in further developing the news piece.
What was your vision for the news when you were a director?
My vision had to do was around the my vision was impacted by my appreciation of the resources, or the limited resources. I principally wanted journalism students, or students here at North Carolina Central, to be able to cut their teeth on writing and delivering news. I took strong interest in that at WSHA when I was teaching there, and using the radio station to create these experiences for students. Right?
Student-centered journalism.
Yeah, but when I moved into management, I had less hands-on. We developed the student radio station, because it was, you can't just, public radio is it's a professional medium, and there needed to be some an interlude for students.
Education.
That they go through. Donnell Lewis, I was on the speech and hearing. Donnell Lewis was speech and hearing, so we would have the students to go through speech and hearing for diction, for pronunciation, all of that. Work at the student station, and then transition over to work in news.
Okay.
That was the system. It didn't work as well as I wanted it to, but that was the pathway that was set up.
In the development of the student radio station, was that Truett O'Neill who set that up?
Mm-hmm.
What purpose did that serve? Say a little bit more about the creation of that.
Well, I just explained that.
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah. Because the students, the student population is looking at the radio station, and they're saying, "Well, why can't we do our thing on this station that belongs to the university?"
Student empowerment.
Student empowerment. And so Truett created an environment where that could be addressed, and there would be a learning process.
Was that a new model, or did that borrow from other models?
That was a new model. Yeah.
Okay, and one more question about WNCU, right? If you had to define the mission of the radio station in your own words when you were leading it, what would that be?
That would be the statement that is in the application for the license, to reach a specific community with services that are currently not provided, that will support the communities that people live in, work in, and play in.
Okay, now, before I get to some concluding questions looking back, I just want to give you a chance to talk about your post WNCU career. What are the highlights of that trajectory as we get to this point today? What did you do after leaving WNCU?
After leaving WNCU, I took a 90-day consultancy at Winston-Salem State University, assessing WSNC FM. And that consultancy extended for 2 years. I managed the station. At that time I was also, I had created Gear Street Media, a media consulting company, providing services in urban and community, I had an elevated statement, but I'm trying to remember it. It's been a while.
You had a lot of experience to bring to bear now at this point.
Yeah. But anyway, I ran that for a few years. That's why I left Winston-Salem, because they wanted to hire me, and I, in some ways, I should have stayed. And then hooked up with my wife, and we started a jewelry company.
What's your wife's name?
Sharon Baker. And we share Louise. I'm Louis and she's Louise. Middle names.
Okay. It's my mother's middle name as well.
Okay. But, that ran for about 5 years. And it was that was interesting because it came from an arts and craft after she was making bracelets, and we then began to make bracelets for the sorority and fraternities, and okay, so there's 9 of those, right? But we had an epiphany that, if you're wearing a bracelet, you went to a college. And so then we started licensing the colleges. So we had, and I'm sorry I left my phone at home, but I would show you a photo of 50 NCCU bracelets, just a horn of plenty, right?
Wow.
As a marketing image. And so we got involved with the from the schools, and then we we subdivided them into the MEAC.
Conferences.
We divided them into conferences.
Did you find success?
Yeah, but the times change, individual situations change, personal stuff. The sorority, some of the sorority and fraternities started charging so much money, and particularly because we were making the bracelets, there was a whole manufacturer licensing piece that just took us out. I mean, it was too much. And traveling, having to travel to the conferences, and the hotel, it was just too much.
You'd be one of the vendors.
Yeah.
Out there. That reminds me, did you ever pledge?
I did, Omega Psi Phi. Yeah.
And did y'all have children?
Yes.
What are your kids up to these days?
Well,
anyone following your line?
We had an unfortunate situation where our son went to visit a friend, and he was playing with his father's gun and shot him in the head.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so you move on, you live, and you move on.
What's his name?
Christopher Jamal Baker. He was 9 years old.
That's unimaginable. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was in 1973. I was at Shaw University then.
You were at Shaw at that time. Yeah. Okay, I have a few just sort of closing questions. I want to know what you see as your proudest accomplishment working in HBCU radio.
I not only worked to get the license, but because of limited resources, HBCU, I hired a local carpenter, and he and I built the first studios here. And I bring that up to round out the whole picture and answer the question, what is the proudest thing? To turn the radio on and hear the station one. Second, still formatting the concept that was originally developed. A jazz station and an information station.
To build the station true to your vision and be able to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Can you tell me if you could define Black radio or HBCU radio, how would you define it?
I mean, technically, it is radio facilities licensed by the FCC to African American, historically Black colleges and universities. What my vision for it, my hope for it is that it in some way continues to represent and reflect on the communities that that the university serves. Because that's constantly changing.
How has it changed?
Well, white students can come to North Carolina Central and apply for a minority grant. Okay, I mean, things change. You know, they constantly evolve, and if you don't evolve with the change, you eliminate yourself. And so, my hope is that the station will reflect the changes of the licensee. Will work. Yeah, we will reflect as a licensee of the university, reflect the university's mission, which allows it to be broader, because the university is not just providing services to Durham.
Sure. And what do you want your legacy to be?
That I started this station. That my legacy be that I'm a media educator and supporter of the arts.
And I know, talking to folks at this station, they carry on your legacy through them when they talk about you and the impact that you've had, right?
I, for a long time, was very shy about that.
How come?
I left the station. I resigned from the station principally because of my interaction with the chancellor. And I had decided also that I had done all that I could do, for the radio station. I've forgotten your question.
Legacy.
And so I was able to continue that, my vision and support at another HBCU, Winston-Salem State. And when I left Winston-Salem, it was in good standing, good position.
Now I'm recalling, you were feeling shy about talking about your influence and your role at this station after having left.
Yeah, and that was part of it. I didn't feel good.
And when you come back now, how do you feel?
I feel fine. Yeah, I mean, that was many years ago.
Yeah.
And you kind of work through stuff.
Time does that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
So we're with the HBCU Radio Preservation Project, and something we ask our narrators is, why is it important that we're pursuing this work of preserving the history of HBCU radio?
This whole conversation answers that question. I would just be repeating, but listen to the story and it tells the answer.
I like that. Now we're at the close. I just want to give you an opportunity to say anything about your life that we may have missed or that we didn't talk about, people you might want to shout out. What are your closing remarks in this interview?
My shout out would be to Tyrone Richmond, and his story, and to Donnell Lewis, who is part of my story from Shaw University to North Carolina Central University, those are the two shout-outs that are really memorable. The WNCU was strongly influenced by but by the Baltimore, the station at
Morgan State.
Morgan State, and WCLK
In Atlanta.
in Atlanta, and in New York. The public radio station in New York.
WNYC? Or one of their jazz stations.
The jazz station.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's actually licensed to the Newark City schools. But
and when you say they're influenced, yeah, tell me.
Well, it's a jazz station.
As jazz stations.
You know, and influence is style. You know, you don't just play music, but you're able to deliver the history. You know, little things like Grover Washington Jr. He classically trained on the saxophone. You know, just to say that brings breadth and depth for the listener. You know, it's something they didn't know, and they know that they can get that kind of information about that product, or you know, here. You know, it's style, how you deliver, and serve your audience.
I think that's a fitting way to close. We could go on forever talking about these stations and the impact that they have. But all right, Mr. Donald Baker, I really, really appreciate your time today. And it's an honor to hear your story and to make it a part of this important project.
Thank you. Thank you.